In the heart of the 15th century, a young ruler rose with a vision that would shatter empires and reshape the world. Sultan Mehmed Fatih, conqueror, lawgiver, strategist, and visionary, left behind a legacy etched in both glory and controversy. In T Series, we uncover 4 defining tales that reveal the mind and might of the man who conquered Constantinople and transformed the Ottoman state into a global empire. We'll explore stories of his iron will, his ruthless decisions, his prophetic ambition, and the unbreakable determination of a ruler destined for greatness. This is the journey of Sultan Mehmed Fatih, not just the conqueror of a city, but the architect of an empire. Join us as we dive into history.
Sultan Mehmed Fatih, the legendary conquest of Constantinople 1453.
Hey history buffs, ever heard of a 21-year-old who conquered a city that had stood for over 1,000 years? Let's talk about Mehmed II, better known as Mehmed the Conqueror, and his legendary siege of Constantinople in 1453. For Mehmed, taking Constantinople wasn't just a military goal. It was an obsession. He was driven by a prophecy, said to be from the Prophet Muhammad himself, foretelling the conquest of this great city. Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, was the last remnant of ancient Rome, protected by walls so formidable they were thought to be unbreakable. But Mehmed wasn't just any sultan. He was a brilliant strategist and a student of warfare. He knew that to breach those legendary Theodosian walls, he needed something extraordinary. So, he commissioned a weapon of unprecedented scale, the Great Bombard. This monster of a cannon, designed by an engineer named Urban, could hurl cannonballs weighing over 1,000 pounds. Imagine the psychological terror, let alone the physical destruction, as these massive stones relentlessly pounded against the ancient defenses. For weeks, the city endured this terrifying bombardment, a sound that echoed the coming end of an era. But the walls weren't the city's only defense. The entrance to its harbor, the Golden Horn, was blocked by a massive iron chain, preventing any enemy navy from entering. This is where Mehmed's genius truly shines. Faced with this impassable barrier, he did the unthinkable. He ordered his entire fleet to be dragged over land. Yes, you heard that right. His men greased logs, creating a slipway, and physically hauled dozens of ships over a hill and behind the enemy's defenses, launching them directly into the protected harbor. The Byzantine defenders woke up one morning to find the Ottoman navy floating in their backyard. The shock and panic were immense. This move completely outflanked them and stretched their already thin defenses to the breaking point. After a grueling 53-day siege, the city finally fell on May 29, 1453. Mehmed rode into the conquered capital, a symbol of his ultimate triumph. He went directly to the Hagia Sophia, the magnificent heart of Orthodox Christianity, and ordered it converted into a mosque, marking the beginning of a new chapter. But Mehmed was more than just a conqueror. He was a city builder. He quickly stopped his troops from looting and destruction, focusing instead on rebuilding. He renamed the city Istanbul and declared it the new capital of his expanding Ottoman Empire. He didn't want a ghost town. He wanted a vibrant, multicultural metropolis. To achieve this, he did something remarkable for the time. He established a Greek Orthodox patriarch, a Jewish grand rabbi, and an Armenian patriarch, inviting people of all faiths to live and trade in his new capital. He understood that diversity was a source of strength and prosperity. So, the fall of Constantinople wasn't just an end. It was a new beginning. It marked the end of the Byzantine Empire and the Middle Ages, but it also signaled the rise of the Ottoman Empire as a dominant world power. Mehmed's legacy is a complex mix of relentless ambition, military genius, and surprisingly pragmatic statesmanship. He didn't just conquer a city. He transformed it into the global hub of Istanbul that we know today. What an incredible story, right? It just shows how one person's vision can change the course of history.
Sultan Mehmed Fatih, the scholar prince of the Ottoman Empire.
When you think of the man who conquered Constantinople, what comes to mind? A fierce warrior, a brilliant military strategist. Well, that's all true. But Mehmed II, the Conqueror, was so much more complex than that. What if I told you he was also a true Renaissance man, a scholar who could have held his own in the courts of Florence or Venice? Let's start with his mind. Mehmed wasn't just a ruler. He was an intellectual powerhouse. He was reportedly fluent in an astonishing 7 languages. Imagine the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire effortlessly switching between Turkish, Arabic, Persian, Latin, Greek, and Italian. This wasn't just a hobby. It was a tool that gave him direct access to the knowledge and culture of both the East and the West, making him one of the most well-read and worldly leaders of his time. He didn't just read books. He collected them passionately. Mehmed established a massive library in his palace, filled with priceless manuscripts from across the known world. He didn't discriminate. Alongside Islamic scholarship, he actively sought out ancient Greek and Latin texts, studying the wisdom of the very civilizations he was often at war with. He invited scholars, artists, and humanists from both the Islamic world and Europe to his court, turning Istanbul into a vibrant hub of intellectual exchange. Perhaps the most stunning example of his Renaissance spirit is a painting. In 1479, he did something almost unheard of for an Ottoman sultan, who traditionally avoided figurative portraits. He invited the famous Venetian painter, Gentile Bellini, to his court. The task: to paint his official portrait. This iconic painting, now hanging in London's National Gallery, shows a thoughtful, refined ruler portrayed in a distinctly European style. It's a bold statement, a sultan embracing the art of the Renaissance, signaling his place as a man of global culture. And finally, a fascinating story that shows how deeply he was immersed in classical history. It's said that after one of his campaigns in Greece, Mehmed visited the ruins of ancient Troy. Standing on that legendary ground, he remarked that he had finally avenged the Trojans by conquering their ancient Greek rivals. Think about that. The Ottoman Sultan saw himself as the heir to the legacy of Troy, a story from 1,000 years before his time. So, the next time you hear the name, Mehmed the Conqueror, remember the full picture. The warrior, yes, but also the polyglot scholar, the patron of the arts, and the Renaissance prince who ruled with a sultan's power. A man who truly bridged worlds.
Sultan Mehmed Fatih, Rise of the Young Conqueror.
Imagine this. You're just 12 years old, and suddenly you're in charge of one of the world's most powerful empires. That's exactly what happened to Mehmed II in the year 1444. His father, Sultan Murad II, heartbroken and tired of war, decided to abdicate the throne and retire to a life of contemplation. He left the massive Ottoman Empire in the hands of his young son. Of course, the great powers of Europe saw this as a golden opportunity. A child on the throne? This was their chance to strike. They quickly organized a new crusade, assembling a massive army to march on the Ottomans. The empire was facing an existential threat, and its leader was a preteen boy. The situation was desperate. All the experienced commanders and advisors knew that only one person could truly lead the army to victory, the retired Sultan, Murad II. The young Mehmed knew this too. He sent messages to his father, begging him to return and take command. But Murad was firm. He had left the world of politics and war behind. He was retired, and he intended to stay that way. This is where the story takes a legendary turn. Faced with his father's refusal, the 12-year-old Sultan showed a flash of the brilliance and iron will that would later define him. He penned a letter to his father. History remembers 2 versions of this incredibly bold message, but they both carry the same powerful punch. The first version says, "If you are the Sultan, come and lead your armies," a direct challenge to his father's sense of duty. The second version is even more audacious. It reads, "If I am the Sultan, I command you to come and lead my armies." Think about that for a second. A 12-year-old boy pulling rank on his own father, the former ruler of the empire. Whether it was the appeal to duty, or the undeniable logic of his son's command, the message worked. Murad II could not refuse. He left his retirement, returned to the capital, and took command of the Ottoman forces. The result was the historic Battle of Varna. The veteran Sultan led his armies to a crushing and decisive victory against the Crusader forces, securing the empire and saving it from disaster. While his father won the battle, the event revealed the incredible political mind and sheer force of will of the young Mehmed. It was a clear sign that this was no ordinary child, but a future leader who would one day change the course of history and earn the title the Conqueror.
Sultan Mehmed Fatih, the fratricide law that changed an empire.
Have you ever heard of a law that legalizes murder? And not just any murder, but the murder of your own brothers. It sounds like something straight out of a grim fantasy novel. But for the Ottoman Empire, it was a very real and very brutal reality. This is the story of the fratricide law, one of history's most chilling pieces of legislation. After Mehmed the Conqueror took Constantinople and forged a massive empire, he faced a critical problem. Succession. In many empires, when a ruler died, his sons would immediately go to war with each other, tearing the realm apart in their fight for the throne. These civil wars were bloody, costly, and could undo decades of progress. Mehmed had witnessed this chaos firsthand and was determined to prevent it from happening again. He knew that a stable empire was a strong empire, and he was willing to do whatever it took to ensure that stability. So, as part of his great legal code, the canon name, he included a clause that would send shivers down the spine of history. The law was shockingly direct. It stated, and I quote, "Whichever of my sons inherits the Sultan's throne, it behooves him to kill his brothers in the interest of the world order." Let that sink in. The new Sultan was not just permitted, but legally obligated to execute his own siblings. The goal was to eliminate all rival claimants to the throne at the moment of succession, nipping any potential civil war in the bud. The logic was cold, calculating, and ruthless. The lives of a few princes were a necessary sacrifice for the stability and well-being of the entire empire and its millions of subjects. For Mehmed, the state came first, even before his own family. This single law dramatically shaped the Ottoman dynasty for centuries. When a new sultan was crowned, the first order of business was often a grim one, a royal funeral for his brothers. This brutal practice ensured a clear line of succession and prevented the internal strife that plagued so many other powerful dynasties. But it came at a terrible human cost, turning brother against brother in the ultimate high-stakes Game of Thrones. It's a stark reminder that the path to power and stability is often paved with difficult and sometimes horrifying choices. What do you think? Was this a necessary evil or an unforgivable act of tyranny? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more fascinating stories from history.